lighten things up. So now NIST, with regard to the speed at which the towers came down. This is in their FAQ, Frequently Asked Questions, of August 2006. Since the story below the level of collapse initiation provided little resistance to the tremendous energy released by the falling building mass, somehow, they don't really explain how that happened, but this part I agree with. The building section above came down essentially in free fall, as seen in videos. Commendable honesty, but how do you do this trick? You see, how do you do this? Well, we set up a thought experiment. You see the jet came in at about 15 floors below the top and did some damage, sure. So what we're going to do is take these 15 floors and we're going to drop them on the building below. Some 85,000 tons of steel, not to mention, oh man, a lot, hundreds of, I don't know how much concrete, but a great deal. And that's on the left. And then the other experiment will take this block and just drop it in air. Which one will hit the ground sooner? The answer is the same. The answer is the same. The question is, how do you do that? Now, just intuitively, I mean, we've driven in cars, most of us, and we hit something, it slows you down, okay? That's conservation of momentum. It's just everyday occurrence almost. You hit something, it slows you down. Somehow, NIST agrees with us about the free fall speed, but they say that the stories below, provided little resistance to this falling mass. Well, that's true, but how do you do that? The only way I know of is to move the mass below, move it out of the way with explosives. And explosive demolition, this is what we see. The upper roof line falls at nearly free fall speed because you move the mass out of the way. It's conservation of momentum. Still, it always works, by the way. It's a fundamental law of science and physics. And now there are several papers in the Journal of 9/11 Studies that discuss this issue of the free fall analysis, providing calculations and numbers, and you can read them there. NIST did not provide any analysis to explain this free fall speed. Perhaps they will. But you know, I'm trying to emphasize that we agree that they fell at the upper roof, then fell at free fall speed. The question is how. I'd like to refer to Professor Rice, whom I've met now, spoke out just about a year ago in the Vermont Guardian. The prevailing theory would have us believe that each of the twin towers inexplicably collapsed upon itself, crushing all 287 massive columns, 47 core columns, 240 perimeter columns on each floor while maintaining a free fall speed as if the 100,000 or more, as more than that, tons of supporting structure, including steel framework underneath, didn't exist. You see, this is a very important point. Now, this is just science, and I'm hoping NIST will grapple with it and give us an analysis, you know? Okay, next point, which we agree with. NIST contracted with Underwriters Laboratories to conduct tests to obtain information on the fire endurance of trusses like those in the World Trade Center towers. These are samples, pattern models, and subjected to intense fire, actually hotter than they expected in the World Trade Center. All 4 test specimens sustained the maximum design load for approximately 2 hours without collapsing. The towers, both of them, it was less than 2 hours since the planes hit that they collapsed. So this is a good test. Bottom paragraph. The results established this type of assembly was capable of sustaining a large gravity load without collapsing for a substantial period of time relative to the duration of the fires in any given location on September 11th. Agreed. This is important information. I like it too. It's an experiment. It's real data. But then how do you explain what happened on September 11th with these data in hand? Okay, but we're trying to start with what we agree on. We agree on this too. both FEMA and NIST. FEMA first. The towers had been designed to withstand the accidental impact of a Boeing 707 seeking to land at a nearby airport. NIST, both WTC-1 and 2 were stable after the aircraft impact, standing for 102 minutes, less than 2 hours, and 56 minutes respectively. The global analyses with structural impact damage showed that both towers had considerable reserve capacity. Amen to that. They're right. We agree with them. And this becomes a foundation for discussion, as opposed to, you know, sometimes popular myth says, well, they're hit by a plane. That's what brought them down, you know, as if that's enough. It's not, and we agree with this. That is not enough to bring these towers down, just hitting them with planes. Of course, Building 7 wasn't hit with a plane at all. Now, notice that they discuss real jets hitting the towers. I'm taking a little bit of an aside here. This is from a slide I showed about a year ago. And this figure 2.9 is from a NIST report, and they show oscillation of the tower. So at time equals 0 on this graph is when the plane hit WTC-2. And then you see oscillating. This is actually swaying back and forth of the tower. This is real motion analyzed carefully. You see the damping. It's quite interesting, really. And it's like a big pendulum upside down, so going back and forth and then damping out. The buildings were designed to do this, but this shows that a real plane hit the towers. Now, why do I even bother to mention that? It's because there are people who suggest that planes did not hit the towers. Actually, it was all video fakery, TV fakery, they call it sometimes. And I'd like to point out there's data here. And as I mentioned, if you read in green, any claim to the contrary must confront these published data and the analysis thereof. Okay, so this is where we get serious with science. We can answer these questions. People hypothesize, well, jets didn't really hit the towers, commercial jets didn't, but we find that they did. By the way, Popular Mechanics, in their debunking article, picks up on these unusual hypotheses. What's your word for straw man? Okay, that's a pretty good term for it. Because it's not what the center core of the 9/11 fact-seeking movement believes or adheres to, these weak hypotheses. You see, as Richard mentioned, scientific method is like a filter. And so you have a hypothesis. Okay, let's say no jets hit the towers, actually. That's a hypothesis. It's fair. But then you confront it with data like this. You actually see the oscillation of the tower following the hit. So this hypothesis hits the filter, and it can't get through. The data won't let it through. On the other hand, you have a hypothesis, well, maybe the towers fell by explosives, you know, and you look at the various data, and Richard did a fine job of going through those for us tonight. The rapidity of the fall, the straight down nature of it, the sounds of explosions and so on. That hypothesis gets through this filter. Now, there are other hypotheses. I don't mind hypotheses as long as we apply data and evidence, hard evidence, to these hypotheses. And if they don't get through, then we put them aside, please. I'm not going to go into detail, but if you read in the NIST report, it does talk about it.